Yo guys, we are back, and for today's video I put on my ugliest Christmas sweater because it is Christmas. And I wish you all a happy Christmas, but more important, today we will build the third tool in our SwatCat Algo Trading Suite, where we will look at funding rates. And I know last video we created something really cool like an AI agent, but in today's video we're going back to the basics and we're going to look at funding rates. And if you don't know what funding rates are, that's okay. I will go over it really quick, and most important, why do we need these funding rates and why do we want to have this data and how can we benefit from this data. So if you think this is interesting or you just want to see how we build something like that, leave a like, leave a comment. I will come back to the comments to answer all your questions as soon as possible. But let's jump into the video. Alright, before we jump in the code, I will show you what we are actually creating. And then I will also explain you really quick why we need this data and what funding rates are. So to start the tool, we type npm run start and then our start comment. And you can see that we are pulling the funding rates for three pairs at this moment. So the WebSocket is open. And here you can see that we are listening for Bitcoin, XRP and Atom. And at the moment, these are the funding rates. And the longs are paying the shorts to be in a long position because the funding rates are positive. And you can also see when the next funding time is and also when it's last updated. Now these funding rates are updated every 8 hours on Binance, so this data is quite static, but we are also saving this data in some kind of database where we can later pull in all this information and we can see how the market is actually doing based on this information. So that is what we will make in this video. And now I will really quick explain what funding rates are and how we can benefit from them. Alright, so you don't need to know exactly everything about funding rates, but this is really important that you know at least the basics so you know why we pull in this data. So what are funding rates? So let's say that you can buy Bitcoin like on spot. You can go to Coinbase, for example. You can buy one Bitcoin for, let's say, 100K. But you can also open a perpetual contract or a perp for the Bitcoin assets. And that's when people are talking about being long or being short. So you have the contract and you have Bitcoin spot. And to keep this price as close as possible to each other from the contract and the Bitcoin spot, they have some kind of mechanism which they called funding rates. So the funding rates, they keep the price from the contract as close as possible to the spot price of the asset. And funding rates are payments that are done every 8 hours, for example, on Binance, and it's between traders that are holding long and short positions. So if the funding rate is negative, then the short traders will pay fees to the long traders. So in other words, if the funding rate is negative, you will pay money to be in a short position. And if the funding rate is positive, long traders, they will pay fees to short traders. So in other words, if the funding rate is positive, you will pay money if you are in a long position. So that's all you need to know about funding rates. But most important, why are they important to us? Because from these rates, we can get some kind of signals. All right, so what are these signals that we can use? So I wrote a few signals down here, but there is much more that we can use. But I just want to give you a feel on why we pull in these funding rates. So let's say that funding rates are super positive in a downtrend. So a positive funding rate means long positions are paying shorts. And in a downtrend, this indicates bullish traders are struggling to maintain positions, which is often a bearish signal. And that means that the market is not supporting the bulls. Now, on the other hand, if the funding rate is super negative, that means that the shorts are paying the longs. And in an uptrend, this indicates that bearish traders are being squeezed, often viewed as a bullish signal. As the shorts, they may need to cover positions and it fuels further upside. Now, we can also combine the funding rates with other indicators like, for example, open interest. And for example, rising open interest with positive funding rates indicates that new money is entering long positions, showing increasing bullish activity, but with higher risk of liquidation if the market reverses. And for example, if falling open interest with decreasing funding rates, that suggests that traders are exiting positions often a sign of a weakening momentum or a market indecision, or maybe a reversal. So these are 4 examples on how we can use funding rates in our strategy, and that's why we pull in the data. And later we will have some kind of script where we take in these funding rates, and then we will take these examples and we will put them in some kind of code so we can really easily see in what direction the market is going. Because there is even people that believe that funding rate is the one and only thing that drives the market in a certain direction. So that's our funding rates in a nutshell, and also why we want to have them. All right, as we are building a lot of tools for this algo trading suite, I'm trying to organize them as good as possible. So as this is a data stream, I will put it in the data streams Binance folder, and I called it fundings.ts. And the fundings.ts script is started by running the Binance funding stream function. And again, for this, we will use a WebSocket. And the WebSocket, we start and initialize it by using a new WebSocket instance. And we just provided the WebSocket URL. Again, all my URLs are stored in the environment file, and I can show you the environment backup file where we have the URL for Binance. And this URL is also documented on their API page. But this time we're looking at products, derivatives trading. Then you go to, let's see, USDM features or futures, WebSocket market streams, and we're looking at the mark price stream because this one is holding the funding rate for us. So this is the WebSocket subscription that we're looking at. But if you want more information, just go to the Binance documentation and you can read through all these kind of subscriptions that you can have and what they return. But for today, we're using mark price stream because it returns the funding rate for us. So back to the script, we have the subscription message because remember, we are using a WebSocket, and if you connect to a WebSocket, you always have to subscribe. And subscribing you're doing by providing a message in this format. So you say subscribe, and then what do you want to subscribe to? In this case, the pair, and what we want from the WebSocket. And as I said, we are looking at mark price stream, and this is the subscription that we need to provide, symbol and mark price. So that's what we are doing here. I also created a unsubscribe message that we will trigger before we start the WebSocket, just to make sure that we are not opening too many connections, because that's not a good idea. So we will always unsubscribe from everything and then subscribe again to the streams that we want to have. So this is the subscribe message that you can see here. And we are saying we want to subscribe to the following pairs, which I have in the config, which is provided here under data streams. And then we have funding, and we want to have the mark price for XRP USDT, Bitcoin USDT, and Atom USDT. So these are the streams that we want to subscribe to. Pairs. So if you go back, that's what we provide here, params, the pairs. And if this is empty, then we have a fallback, which is Bitcoin USDT. So these are our subscription messages that we need to provide to our WebSocket URL to receive streams from Binance. So once we have set up these messages, we can move on. We create a funding rate map and a database error variable. I will explain you later why we have these two. Next, we have the WebSocket listeners. And the WebSocket can listen to a lot of things, and some of these are close, error, and open. And once the WebSocket opens, we subscribe and unsubscribe. As I said, I will first send the unsubscribe message, so I know there is no connections open with this WebSocket for us. And then we will subscribe to our pair streams. So that's what we are doing here once the WebSocket opens. Next, if we receive a message from the WebSocket, then we want to do something. And of course, we store the data that we receive in a JSON string, and then we parse it into a JSON object so that we can actually use the object and manipulate it easier. We can reach the arguments in the object easier. So that's why we actually do this. Again, we're using TypeScript, so everything is typed. So you can also click on this and then you will go to the actual type and you will see what we get back. But also this you can see in the documentation. So once we get something back from the stream, it will be in this format. And E stands for event type, which is mark price update. We have the event time, the symbol, the mark price, the index price, the estimated settle price, the funding rate, and the next funding time. So that is what we will get back. And we created a type for that so that we can easily use it in TypeScript. So that's what we get back here. For every of the streams that we subscribe to, we will get back this information. And we are interested in the funding rate. So if we subscribe to the WebSocket, the first message that we will receive, and I can show you what I mean, if you subscribe to a stream, this is the response. And the response is also viewed as a message. So what we do here is just checking if the response that we got is actually a funding rate, or is it the success message from when we subscribed to the WebSocket. So that's a quick check to make sure that we can show like, hey, we are now subscribed or unsubscribed to the WebSocket. If it's not a subscribe message confirmation, then we move on and we take all the information that we receive, remember, from the stream that we get back here. We just put it into variables with a nicer name. And that's what we do here. So we get the funding rate. They are returned to us as a string, so we make sure that it's like a float or a number. The percentage is times 100 because if you can see, this is the funding rate raw, but if you do it times 100, then you get it into a percentage. So that's what we do here. And you can also calculate the funding rate payment that you need to do based on the size. And for this example, I put in a size in the config, and this is a size that you can choose yourself, but I set 25,000. So then I can easily see what we need to pay when we have a perp size of 25,000. So then we know like for 25,000, we need to pay so much to the longs or to the shorts, or we get so much back. Then we have the funding payment. Again, if it's negative or positive, we just want to make sure that we get it in a round number, the next funding time, the event time, and the price of the asset. Then we take the times that we receive, in this case, the next funding time and the event time, and we transform it into a time that we can read better. And for that, we use a library called Luxon. You can find more information if you just search for npm i Luxon. You can find info on that. But this library just helps us to transform these times that we receive, because they are in some kind of Unix timestamp, as you can see, into something more readable for us. So if we did that, we move on and we are going to check our funding rates. So if our funding rate is smaller than 0, it means it's negative, and the longs have to pay to the shorts. And that's why we say payer here is long. So the funding rate is positive, the longs are paying, and we also give it a color, in this case red, and a red icon, because we are always want to be long, and that's why it's red. Next, if the funding rate is smaller than 0, it means that it's negative, and that means that the shorts are paying. And we also give it a green color and a nice icon, because we always want to be long. And if it's 0, which is almost never the case, then no one is paying. So then we take all this information and we output it in a nice string, so it looks really cool on our console. And we are also checking if it's already in our funding map. And a map is just a combination of a key, in this case the symbol, and then the price in this case. And we want to see if it's already there or if it changed, because we don't want to always update the value because it updates every 8 hours. That's why we have this funding rate map here that we created in the beginning. and that's why we store all our funding rates in. So the moment a new one comes in or doesn't exist or it's changed, it will add it to the funding rate map. And if it already exists, it updates it automatically. But the thing is, you just need to remember, if we receive a funding rate for XRP, we put it in that map. And we also, with the value, if you receive one for Bitcoin, we put it in that map also with the value. And if a new funding rate comes in, because we receive it every 3 seconds, but it only updates every 8 hours, we will also update it in the map, but we don't want to have super much records. That's why we have this funding rate map. So we just have 3 mappings for all the pairs, or 4, it depends on how much pairs you're checking, in this funding rate map. And in this funding rate map, we can also loop through to show it properly in our console, and we cleared it before, so it shows like really smooth, that it's not always outputting new lines, but we see them, as I showed earlier, like always standing there, just updating the changes. So we also output if there is when the next funding time occurs and when it was last updated. And also we store it into a database, and that's why we have this check here. If the funding rate is not in the map yet, or the funding rate changed, we say true at the B record, and then we store this funding rate also in our database. And we create a object for that, where we just collect all the information that we have here. Top. We put it into a new funding constant, and then we send it to a database. And for that, we use the function insert funding. And if you click on this, you see that it will use SQL3 to collect all the information, where it just opens the database connection for us. Here we have the config with where the database is to be found. And I think it is under my system, or where did we settings, DB name tracker. So we will save our database here. If it's not existing, it will create it for us. It will also check if the table exists that we want to store it in. So if the table does not exist, it will create it. If it exists, it will just skip it. And if that's the case, our funding rates will be inserted into the table. So we can later on use all this data to integrate it into our strategy. So that's what this insert funding function does. So we have it in our database. So that's the whole script for the WebSocket listener for funding rates. It's quite straightforward, but it will help us a lot with building a great strategy where we can use funding rates in the future. So that's it. If you think this was interesting, leave a like. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. And again, I will come back to you as soon as possible with answering all these questions. And make sure to come back for the next video, because we are going to build something really cool as well.